So in chapter 5, we encounter Peter for the first time, and the call, or Simon Peter, and he's called by Jesus into the ministry. What does Simon Peter's call suggest for our lives?
The whole history of being called or chosen is pretty basic and deep to Judeo-Christian. Yeah, so if you don't get called, if you don't get chosen, if you don't get an assignment. So to me, the most important thing is to keep remembering that if you get converted, you also get an assignment. We keep, I think, deteriorating the concept into you get a spiritual high, you get this exciting experience, and you feel good or whatever, but there's nothing practical to it. I don't believe you can find a story in the Bible where somebody got converted and did not get an assignment. I mean, you see a burning bush, and that's nice, and you get to go home and say, gee, I saw a burning bush. No, you get sent to Egypt to risk your life to free the slaves. And so, even though this is maybe short form for Peter, it's still a classic conversion, because his commission, his vocation, calling from God, is to become a fisher of men. And of course, in this case, as a disciple of Jesus. And that's wonderful. So you see all the component parts. The first reaction, you would think, to encounter like that, to the great miracle of fish is, hey, come fish with me every day. I mean, we can make this into a good business. But his first reaction is, depart from me, for I'm a sinful man. And that's always our reaction when we have a genuine experience of the Spirit, or of the living Jesus, or of the living God. So, because we know we're unworthy and we cannot stomach it. So then we have to get reassured, and that's also classic next, that God reassures us that, no, I really meant you. I'm really calling you, and you're not going to do this all by yourself, etc. So I just like to see, and I would hope all the groups would sit down and make a list of the component parts of a genuine conversion, so that nobody ever again tries to say, well, this is just an emotional high.
You really just share a lot of patterns that Peter's call with others in the great prophets in the Old Testament, and as you're suggesting in our own lives. You think about Moses. His first thing was objection to, I can't speak well, and Jeremiah, I'm too young, and Isaiah, boy, I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell amongst the people of unclean lips. They're all like, oh, yeah, this is too high for me. This is
winning baptism stuff. How would you like to have the burning coal?
Yeah. So you're suggesting again, or Luke is suggesting, through not only tracking Jesus but also tracking Peter, that you get the spiritual high of revelation, but then you get, you're into it.
That's right. Damascus Road, I'm an apostle to the Gentiles. I mean, just everywhere you look. So the formula is pretty traditionally sound.
Well, it sounds like so many counseling experiences I've had with people coming in, and they've gotten wildly excited about something, has lit them up. It could be through a small group or preaching or what have you, and then suddenly they are down in the dumps, and they think, what's wrong? What's wrong? I had this great high, and now life is incredibly tough, and we have to go through that whole process of, well, is it what's wrong, or is this a sign that what is happening that something is actually going right?
And that's why we need chapter 4 to remind us. If you get a genuine call, the next thing is you get tempted by Satan, you go into the dark night of the soul. I mean, Satan's not going to allow you to be a great servant of God if he can help it. So he'll drop you off path if there's any possible way he can do that. So if you get a moment where you encountered the Spirit, you ought to be saying to yourself, okay, I better get ready.
I imagine participants in the groups will have a wide variety of understandings of the Satan figure that appears in chapter 4 and is referred to throughout Luke 2. There's a wide variety of opinions about who Satan is and the existence of Satan. And I think bottom line is, I think no matter what one believes about Satan, I think all people could agree that there is something that always seems to come along to trip us up in some way that seems highly intelligent, more intelligent than we are, and Luke certainly is very much connected, understands that, and Jesus, and And if we're not aware of that principle, that there is something that keeps tripping us up, then that's when we think, oh, if I have a spiritual experience, then life must be high and all the time, and life must be good. But that's just not the way it works. To me, Luke's depiction of what happens to Jesus and the rest of the disciples, it has a high realism. It feels like their lives feel like our life.
I know that liberals are loath to personify evil into a satanic being of intelligent power. I don't know anybody who walks the path who doesn't end up realizing something like that is the best explanation. So maybe it's just humans personifying, but if you want to understand, that's what you do.
To me, it doesn't matter so much whether somebody believes in Satan or not. It's do you acknowledge the patterns? Are the patterns evident that you can't just have life go along easily and just kind of exist in that way? There's always, and that we are going to be tempted by the good. We can argue all day long about who's doing that tempting, but bottom line is we are. Now moving on to Jesus healing a leper, and I'm wondering what your thoughts about this is, because this will come up later in Luke 2. He's healing quite a number of people. It seems like he's always healing people, and then he sends them away. Wouldn't they be his best followers if they're healed by him? Why does he keep sending people away after he heals them?
Well, I don't know how often he sends them away. I know how often he says, don't tell anybody.
Yeah, things like that.
Same point. He doesn't want his ministry to peak too soon because he needs some time to train his disciples, and if his fame spreads and he gets into trouble too fast, he'll never be able to complete the training. So I think he's very serious, though many people won't take him seriously, when he says, please don't tell anybody. I got troubles enough. And any business that peaks too fast is in trouble. So he's patient and he's waiting.
I wonder if there might be an element of also his, he seems to always be very careful not to try to control people, to give them what he's got to give, but then not to grasp onto them.
And tell them to, How is it that Jesus never coerces anybody and all of his followers think they should?
Exactly, and so I as a minister want to say, oh, there's somebody we can really great put to use. We've healed them before, and Jesus is saying, go away. And it's like, well, if you've been healed by Jesus, you probably could be very susceptible to being controlled by Jesus too if you hung out with him for too long.
I also think it's important, and that's why I think you're probably bringing it up. It's interesting that you can't name a single person Jesus healed who became a top disciple. Possibly Mary Magdalene is the exception, possibly. And that might give us a hint about the third temptation and why Jesus would not base his ministry on that kind of healing miracle, because that's not really going to make it.
In chapter 5, we find him going out to a deserted place to pray, and Luke indicates that this seems to be a pattern for Jesus, that Jesus would withdraw to places like this.
Over and over.
Over and over and over again throughout Luke. Why would someone like Jesus need to pray? Doesn't he just kind of have it all in him right all the time?
I guess because he had a humility that we lack. Jesus knows that if he gets off track, stops following the guidance of the Spirit, he doesn't have a prayer, so to speak. So he prays all the time and says, are we still on track? How do you want me to handle this? So he constantly needs, desperately, to get that contact and to keep that channel open. And so that's why I say, top ace of all time needed all this time in prayer, and I'm going to do it in 10 minutes. And then I wonder why my life won't go right.
Reminds me of a study that was done, an extensive study done on prayer that suggested that prayer actually doesn't get interesting for people on a consistent basis unless it's 30 minutes. That's when people start regularly saying prayer is a very important and interesting thing in my life.
Well, it can happen faster than that, but we do have to shut up and listen.
That's right. I think 25 minutes is just learning to shut up.
5 minutes.
5 minutes is downloading something.
Excellent.
Yeah. Lastly, we also, there's a lot going on in chapter 5. The temptation to tell groups double up is going to be with us forever because, again, you can spend years on this stuff.
I think the healing of the paralytic's even more exciting than the leper, right?
Here we go, yeah. Let's get to that.
Okay. Well, I'm fascinated by the paralytic because, first of all, he doesn't have faith. His friends have faith in his, for him and about him. And that's encouraging to me. And I also think that Jesus never again taught out of his home, because figured out, you preach and teach and heal all day and then you have to fix your roof at night. So he learns. But most important of all, of course, is the way that Jesus equates that forgiveness of sins with the healing. That just constantly blows me away. And I would hope that the groups would not shortchange that. I mean, it's uncomfortable to us to think about what that means.
Do you have a suggestion for that?
Well, endless, but I'm not here to answer all the questions, am I? And take all the fun away from the groups struggling. I mean, they're supposed to be searching for themselves, don't you think?
Oh, maybe so. Maybe so.
But there's gold in them, there hills.
Absolutely. I think that also, lastly, on chapter 5, it's worth bringing up this thing about the new wine, and that right away Jesus is also accused of being this wild partier. To me, that's instructive. That these disciples, Jesus is hanging out with the sinners. He's with them in their parties, and to the point enough so that people are getting nervous about this, and sometimes I think, would that the church of these days, when have we ever been accused by society of partying too much, in the church? And if we aren't regularly being accused of being a bit too happy and a bit too zesty like that, how close are we really to the message of Jesus?
Whenever Christians are accused of too much partying, it's, to take disciplinary action.
Exactly. So I hope in your groups you'll feel free to be festive.
So, and why does Jesus end saying, they all say that the old wine is better?
I've got bottles of wine in my cellar. The old wine tastes better to me. It's smoother, it's richer, more refined.
But we don't like the new wine. We don't like the new covenant. We don't like the new message. Yeah.